mean, this song is so beautiful. It's a very subtle thing to me, but it is something that has always stuck out of like the feeling of it helps the feeling of the song of this like I can't wait to get this,
Right.
like so
It's always been what I call a resonant favorite. And that means that, for me, that means it's almost inexplainable. The music and the vocals and maybe an aspect of what you're talking about. There's just something that's like, wow, this one really is deep and primal for me.
All right, welcome back to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. I am Adam Schreiner. I am here with Matthew Hartz, and we are doing a album analysis of Shutdown Volume 2. We are just working through each album of the Beach Boys. Right now, we're working through these earliest albums. If you are new to the podcast, then we started doing this with Sunflower. So Sunflower on, within the episode, we do album analysis. And so you can check those album analysis there. Right now, we're going through up to we go through the end of the 60s, which is the 2020 album. 2020. So we're going to end up with 2020 with these individual episodes. And so the episode that corresponds with the timeline here would be still 1962 to 1964. So we're still in the Bud Goodman. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So real quick, if you like this podcast, please subscribe, hit the little bell notification, do all that stuff that helps us. Tell your friends. You can follow Matthew on Instagram. It's just Matthew Hartz Music. And then on Facebook, you just look up Matthew Hartz, and that's mainly what we use: Facebook, Instagram, and just
when we do
YouTube.
anything.
When we do anything, which is not often. And we just thank you all for listening and subscribing. We do want to mention, though, actually kind of along the same lines of this being in the same, corresponding to the 1962 to 1964 episode, is we're kind of been in the same location in your Beach Boys room.
Yeah, the museum is because it's really condensed in this spot of how many albums got released in this time period. And we've talked about it a whole bunch before, but the reason that Brian famously broke down in the end of 1964 was not just the work he did with the Beach Boys, which was voluminous, but also many other people, just frantic, manic pace.
It's and when we eventually do the tour, the recorded tour of this room down here and this whole museum, it's you have this set up in a chronological way.
Part of it is set up as a timeline for the Beach Boys.
And so we're just in this area that they just cranked them out. So we'll be finally kind of be moving in a couple episodes from now. We'll kind of be relocating. But that is why the backgrounds and all the stuff has kind of been the same. So just wanted to mention that. Also, in the last episode, we had John Hartz. We had Matthew's brother, which was an awesome episode. That was fun having him on here. And, he's been around Matthew and his experience with the Beach Boys since they were little kids. So it was really cool to get his perspective on stuff. And he had awesome insight.
Yeah, that's he was. Someone asked me when I mentioned that my brother was on the next episode when we were out with Asleep at the Wheel. They said, "Oh, what did your brother have to do?" And I said, "Oh, everything from the beginning. I mean, from the first performances to, he really was. He was, he knew the music as well. He wasn't not from a musician's aspect, but he knows those songs frontward, backward, and forward, and all that stuff. So
And one thing I just want to mention too is, in that video, when I was editing it, I was moving a lot, and it looks like I had too much caffeine or something. And what's going on?
It was the cocaine, and we all know it.
Yeah, exactly. This starts with a C. So how we had to have everything set up is there was a lot of stuff in front of me, and so I had to, when I was talking to Matthew, I had to lean this way. And when I was talking to John, I had to lean this way. So there was a lot of leaning back and forth, and I was driving myself crazy when I was editing it. And I just got to the point where I was like, if I'm editing out of the shot, I don't even care, because I just wanted to explain that. But anyway, before we get into Shutdown Volume 2, I did finally bring, and I've mentioned this before, we talked about John in, being a part of your Beach Boys as a kid, and so I had my little compilation album. So this, let's see.
Oh yeah, I have seen that.
Have you seen this before?
Yeah.
So this is what I experienced. This was the Beach Boys' greatest surfing songs, and this was released in 1990 from CEMA Special Markets.
Yeah, it's just they just licensed Beach Boys songs and could put them out any which way they wanted to.
So this was what I grew up on. My dad had this album, has this kind of this magenta CD, and these 12 songs: Surfing USA, Little Do Scoop, Don't Worry Baby, Help Me Rhonda, Catch a Wave, Barbara Ann, All Summer Long, Do You Want to Dance, Girls on the Beach, Surfing, You're So Good to Me, and Summertime Blues. Those are the tracks that I grew up with.
And that album's called Greatest Surfing Songs, and there was, I think, maybe 3 surfing songs on it.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. And it's funny
But that's typical of how all those compilations were done, just very haphazardly, didn't really give a shit what tunes were going on there. They just slap it out there, put a Beach Boys picture on it, call it anything they wanted to. The Beach Boys had nothing to do with any of that. Nothing.
Do you?
But there was probably.
Do you know where this picture's from?
Yeah, that's from Zuma Beach, the photo shoot in Zuma Beach in 1967, I believe.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I'm sure Matthew would know. I'm sure Matthew would know where this came from. So,
literally.
The fact that you say haphazard. I mean, when I read the back of this, it is so poorly written. This little like blurb on here, it's just like the most.
Here's what this is. Adam, there were literally hundreds of those types of compilations which don't have, you know what that significance has? It was what you listened to. It just happened to be the thing that you had. Now, when we talk about some other compilations like Endless Summer, that's a whole different ballgame. That was released by Capitol Records. The Beach Boys consulted on it.
Sure.
It was doing, but there are literally, I'll bet you there's hundreds of those that they don't, and it's just another confusing thing for Beach Boy fans because they think, well, first of all, you probably thought that was a regular album growing up.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And then you find out, oh, it's not. It's a compilation. It's a bunch of things from a bunch of different albums and eras and everything. And then, oh, well, this is even further than that. The Beach Boys had nothing to do with this. This was a separate company that just licensed the song. You can tell by the blurb they wrote. They're just appealing. They're appealing to a mass market that doesn't know anything about the Beach Boys.
Yeah, and that's. And I mean, they licensed it, so obviously the Beach Boys are making some money off of it, you know, in the licensing aspect of it. But yeah, that was just I'd mentioned what I grew up with, and I wanted to share that. I tried to get it from my dad when I was over there on Father's Day, and we went and looked for it, and we couldn't find it. And I think either my brother took it and lost it, or because we both grew up, you know, same on that album. But it was, I thought, you know, I wanted to share with what I grew up with. That's what that is. But enough about that. Let's get back to the analysis here. So I'll let you take it away and provide any context or anything like that.
Shutdown Volume 2?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm going to hold up the cover for our visual podcast people. This is one I didn't have growing up early on, but I always, on the back of the Beach Boy albums in the 60s, Capitol would put some of the other previous albums on here. So I think it's on Summer Days. I saw the cover of Shutdown Volume 2, and when I was a little kid even, I thought, that is the coolest album cover. I just love that. I love the way Brian has his hair styled in these particular photos. There's other ones like he's same way for the I Get Around single, which that photo session must have been about the same time. But I love that album cover of them in their, you know, it's their car garb, I guess, you know, those blue jackets. Yeah. And that's actually Dennis's Stingray and Carl's Grand Prix.
Oh, cool.
Right. But so that's their cars. Enough about the cover. So it was recorded in January and February of 1964. Little Deuce Coupe got released in October of 63. Surfer Girl was released the month right before that. So it's just a couple of months, and they're in the studio recording, you know, new material for a new album. It was released on March 2nd. 64. So in the studio making this album, and it gets released that quickly. The lineup, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Is primarily the Beach Boys again playing the instruments on this record, whereas people have thought for years a lot of the songs on here, there are a couple, but didn't think that the Beach Boys were playing. And yeah, it's primarily the Beach Boys. And let's go through that again. This time minus David, because David, we talked about it in the history of the Beach Boys, but he got let go in October of 63. He had an argument with Murray. Mm-hmm. They officially moved him out and moved Al in as the official performing Beach Boy again, even though he'd been with them recording and touring even before this, right?
Right.
Established all that. So the band was Al on the bass most of the time, Brian on the piano, Carl on guitar, Dennis on drums, so basically the core Beach Boys. Then a small version of the Wrecking Crew joins them on Fun, Fun, Fun. Hal Blaine does some supplemental drumming, but then I'll just name off the guys that are part of what I call the small crew. Glenn Campbell, Ray Pullman on bass, and then the two sax players, Steve Douglas and Jay Migliori.
Okay.
So they're the small crew, right? But they're only on two songs, Fun, 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 and Warmth of the Sun, just kind of augmenting the Beach Boys. Okay. There is one song where there's a big Wrecking Crew on here. We'll get to that. But I just want to say that. That's the lineup for this album.
Good to know.
Okay. Fun, Fun, Fun leads it off. And it was literally recorded New Year's Day on 1964. Mm-hmm. In 1964. When the single was released on February 3rd, it went to number 5 originally. Wow. The reason it didn't go any higher than that because the spot was the top 4 spots I think were held by the Beatles. Now that was February 3rd is when Fun 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 was released. On February 9th, 1964 was the Beatles' performance on the Ed Sullivan Show, which blew the Beatles up. That was the moment. I was reading some television statistics. It's like 50% of the country had tuned into that.
Wow.
It just
wild.
Nuts, So that's big because, that starts happening right about now in America, this Beatlemania that, the Beach Boys have been the biggest thing for the last year in America before that. And here comes this, huge deal. So anyway, I talked about there's a couple of augmenting musicians on Fun, Fun, Fun. For years, it was thought that Glenn Campbell did the guitar intro, but studio tapes show that it's Carl doing it on there.
Okay, very cool.
And it's also, the intro should be familiar to most people because it's a slight variation on the Johnny B. Good intro, which Chuck Berry used that type of an intro for some other things too and kind of slightly varied it up too. But it's basically a tribute to a Johnny B. Good intro.
So there is a difference?
Yeah, there's slight note differences and stuff in compared to the way Chuck Berry did the intro exactly to his Johnny B. Good. But I mean, they're so slight that most people wouldn't recognize some of that stuff. But I also heard recently that Mike might have been the guy to suggest using something like a Johnny B. Good intro for this too.
And it's only the intro that's similar.
It changes. The rest of it is not. It's just I think one place in liner notes it's described as the son of a Johnny B. Good intro.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like it's kind of a nod to Chuck maybe.
Got it.
And
obviously, and Chuck Berry was a huge influence on them. So
yeah. Well, they'd already done Surfing USA based on Sweet Little Sistine,
exactly.
Right?
So,
I love Carl's intro. The tune is really cool, and it's a lot harder than most people think. Bill Lyle's my friend and great bass player, I play with a lot around town. He says one of the funniest things to him is for a band somebody to request fun, and they go, oh yeah, sure, we can do that, and then they start to do it, and then they get to the chorus and they fall apart because they didn't realize it was as hard as they thought.
Right.
It's because it just seems fun.
Well, that's even my, to that point, my buddy who, is a musician, anytime he's like, I love Beach Boys music, but every time I go to play it, it's a lot harder than I realize,
Another cool thing on this, and I think I even noticed it as a kid, is I love the answering vocals. Yeah, I think the second verse and the third verse where you shouldn't have lied down, you shouldn't have lied, those little gang things that are answering vocals.
Sure.
I think that's kind of a unique aspect of this thing. I was going to go ahead and play a little bit of the chorus, but I was listening to it, and it's in E flat. So the verses are real simple. Got her daddy's car, and she cruises through the hammer, stand down to the 4, back to 1, 5. So that's all real easy. And then 4, but here we go. Right, I'll slow this down, and we're gonna go 1, and then 3 minor, 4, 5, and then 1, and then 4, and then 3 minor, and then 2 minor, which is subbing for the 5 there. But that's all over fun, 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 till her daddy takes it. That's what really gives it its emotional thing. Fun, fun, till her daddy takes it either way.
Oh, yeah.
Back into this, right? No,
that's cool when you kind of isolate it like that. You can really hear that feeling.
Yeah, and it that's because of the chord changes. You could dumb that way down and not have those moves in it, but that's what's in it, and that's what makes it magic, right?
Cool.
So anyway, there is fun, fun, fun.
Okay.
I think most people know the tune.
Yeah, and I didn't. The only thing I really had was the Johnny B. Good question on it. Was for me, I thought it was a exact take of Johnny B. Good, and so but that's cool. And I also didn't know that it wasn't Johnny B. Good all the way through either.
Yeah. Well, it's it's kind of the verses standard rock chords, so I get where all of that comes from for you.
So then we get to Don't Worry Baby, which talk about a timeless song. I mean, a lot of their music is timeless, but this one is just this is definitely up there for me as competing for my favorite Beach Boys song of all time, because it's just
me too.
It's just so, I don't know, it's just so good. I just can't even.
I was introduced to it from Endless Summer, that Christmas that I got it when I was 5, right? And I heard it, and I mean, loved it. I was so young back then. It's hard, I wouldn't know anything about the lyrics, even if I listened to them, right? To even know it was about a car song or about a guy in a car race or whatever. Yeah. It was just all these musical things were happening, and I was in love with it. It's a Brian Wilson and Roger Christian tune. So Roger, who wrote Little Deuce Coupe and all those tunes on the Little Deuce Coupe album. Brian's kind of at the end of his period with him, but he's got some classics, as you'll see, still with Brian to let out of the bag. Carl had a quote in the 80s, or I think what I was doing was reading a magazine article in the late 80s or early 90s when members of famous rock bands like Keith of the Rolling Stones, they asked him what his favorite all-time Stones tune was, and he was probably Flash, meaning Jumpin' Jack Flash. And they asked Carl what he thought the best Beach Boys musical moment was, and he said, "Don't Worry, Baby."
Yeah.
That's Carl.
That's and there's this thing that happens in Don't Worry Baby that I've always loved, and it comes with that like bop 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 bop.
I'll talk a little bit of that.
Okay,
bit. I found out that's supposed to be like a choking cry.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
and it's David. I said David's not on this album, but actually the Beach Boys were gone after he had been let go, and Brian needed somebody to do that. It's a little bit of dispute, but David himself says that he came in and overdubbed that little choked guitar part on there.
Oh, okay. So what I love about how they use it is it comes in. That's how it starts. Then they do. The verse, but then on the next part where you could have put it in there, they just go right into the verse. And there's just something about how that feels to me that I like because like I just remember thinking even as a kid like expecting that guitar part to come back in, but it's almost like it gives the feel. I just want to just put it on. Actually, I'm gonna just put it on real quick. Yeah. I know it's Don't Worry Baby, so we've all heard it a million times, but I mean, with as much as we love it, we'll just do it. I mean, this song is so beautiful. It's a very subtle thing to me, but it is something that has always stuck out of like the feeling of it helps the feeling of the song of this like, I can't wait to get this, you know.
Right.
Well, it's been building up inside of me.
Like, so it's just.
It's always been what I call a resonant favorite, and that means that for me, that means it's almost inexplainable. The music and the vocals and maybe an aspect of what you're talking about. There's just always something that's like, wow, this one really is deep and primal for me. Another thing I want to say about it before I demo a little bit about it, it was Brian's answer to his favorite song, "Be My Baby," which had come out earlier that year. And he gave it to, he wanted Spector to record it for the Ronettes. He wanted it to be a follow-up for them to "Be My Baby," and Phil, because he didn't write it, decided not to do it. So Brian took it back, and I'm glad that he did, so they'd get to do, you know, their thing with it. But the vocal blend is so cool on it, and one of the things that stands out to me is Dennis's vocal, especially in the choruses. It's just a 2-note line that he sings while the other guys are moving, but he's in the middle of the stack, and he's singing this constant note while they're all moving against it. And it's another example of Brian using what I call polyphony. While other things are moving, Dennis is staying the same through the middle of that. And I never knew that when I was young, but when I think it was one Wilson project, and I was studying how to sing this thing, I go, what the hell is going on with that voice in the middle? That's so cool. And it was a fifth harmony to sing in there. And, you know, instead of trying to find another spot, Brian just said, okay, somewhere, you know, it's really kind of genius stuff. Mm-hmm. I will demo it just a little bit because it's really cool. It's in E, A, and then to the 5, B, E, then we're going 2 to 5, F sharp minor 7 to B, and then go up G sharp minor 7 to C sharp, and that sets up this modulation. Now the chorus is in F sharp. Don't worry, baby, up to the 2 minor for that, which is G sharp minor, and then C sharp, and then F sharp. Now, to get back, this is the cool thing. It's C sharp with a sus4, and then the B with a sus4, and we're back to E. Just, you need a masterful mind, you know, to hear those kind of things just organically and be able to incorporate them into the compositions is just crazy. I'll get off this one, or we'll be on it forever.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, rightfully so, though. I mean, this one still comes up, you know, and I hear this song all the time still getting played. Oh, yeah. Which we don't even mention that Fun.
Oh, is part of the trailer for the new Barbie.
Yeah, the new Barbie movie.
So, I don't know if it's officially part of the soundtrack, but I know that the advertisements that I've seen have fun prominently. So this might be another, you know, big jolt for the Beach Boys.
Yeah,
you know?
and yeah, that's
the story of their career is
these like these
resurgent moments.
Yeah, well, and the Barbie movie apparently is a really good movie, like for adults, and I've heard nothing but good things about this Barbie movie, which is kind of funny. But the fact that they're still, as one of the main trailers, they're using, you know, fun, and just like with like heroes and villains in that The Boys, which is a huge Amazon Prime show.
And then Barbie in particular. Remember, we've talked about, so before they were the Beach Boys, so they had that song that they did, Barbie, with Hype Morgan, with the really stratospheric Brian vocal in it. And then in the 80s, Brian did a one-off sing. It says the Beach Boys, but it's all Brian, and it's a song called Barbie that I just love. I've got a little blue single. It came with the doll came with the single, right?
Oh, okay.
And so Brian and the Beach Boys have a history with Barbie too.
Oh.
And now here they are, part of
Nice.
the, so.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Okay, so then we'll keep moving then.
Yeah.
In the parking lot.
In the parking lot, another Brian and Roger Christian tune. So the same guys that wrote Don't Worry Baby, right? I didn't hear it until the two first came out in the 90s because I did not have Shut Down Volume 2. Of course, I heard Fun, Fun, Fun and Don't Worry Baby and a lot of other songs because they were included on compilations. But remember, I didn't hear this album early on. And so in the 90s, when I'm already in college, it was the first time. And I put in the notes that I was like, it came on, and because it was new and I'd never heard it, mainly, it was just insane new Beach Boy harmonies and a great chord progression. And I remember I was like thrilled with this song at first, but it's kind of waned a little bit on me. Just after the newness has worn off, it's not one of my favorites from the record.
It's had nothing really stuck out. I thought it had a cool intro and outro. That was really the things that stuck out to me.
Musically, the thing that's funny is and I wrote a note in here, there are modulations all over almost all of these songs. I mean, Brian had this is like, so even in the simplest things, there's...
Will you remind me what modulation?
Modulation is a key change, not just a chord change, but an actual feels like and can be interpreted as a whole movement of the system to a new place.
Got it. Okay.
So anyway, and Don't Worry Baby modulated from E to F sharp and back. Well, I was listening to this today and I was kind of going through the keys and I'm going, oh, wow, this starts in F sharp and modulates to E. I wonder if that was by design to have it right after a song that went from E to F sharp. Because, F sharp is a crazy, nobody plays in F sharp. That's the rarest, that key is the rarest one to play in. And there's a few songs or at least a couple on this record that are in F sharp. But I want to show just a little bit of that In the Parking Lot. Okay, so In the Parking Lot starts in F sharp. We're always first. Dun, 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 4 chord. Dun, 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 and then the 2 minor, and then the 5. And then we go to the key of E for dun, 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 4 and E, then E, back to 4, straight to a C sharp, which is kind of like a punk rock change, but it sets up for going back to F sharp again. Nobody knows that complexity is in there. Except for musicians, and me, like even sitting down to look at, oh wow, I'm fine. I didn't know till this morning that Don't Worry Baby went E to F sharp, and then In the Parking Lot goes from F sharp to E. And
Interesting.
Yeah, the singing on this is rough in spots.
Yeah.
There's some loose harmonies. Courtesy, I did see one funny quote on the internet the other day, and it's not valid, but it was funnier than hell. And they were talking about one of these early songs, and they were talking about Dennis's vocal on one of them, and he says, apparently Dennis had been suffering from Dennis didn't learn to sing until 1967. But it's not right. It was funny.
Taking a shot, for sure.
Okay, done with that one.
So then, the Love is...
That's Cassius Love versus Sonny Wilson. Do you know what they're referencing there?
Cassius Clay, right?
Cassius Clay, who ended up changed his name to
Muhammad Ali.
Yes,
okay.
Right. Okay, so it was a current deal, but Sonny Liston was the Beach Boys were kind of into boxing, and I think they listened to that match on the radio. They got some beer and went up on a hill and listened to it, but anyway, it's kind of cool because it's referencing a current deal.
Sure.
It's filler,
is it staged? It's got to be staged, right?
Yes, completely.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like it was supposed to be like as if it wasn't staged.
No,
Okay.
but it's staged, and they were trying
I just
to
didn't know
make
if they
it.
were trying to pass it off that it wasn't staged.
No,
Okay,
no.
okay,
As a
okay.
matter of fact, we're going to get into that when we talk to about the track. Like, Brian was really into humor, and
Yeah.
so even though he got about it in some weird ways sometimes, I mean, there's people who say, "Oh, why was this?" Let alone why was it on the album? Why was it number 4?
Yeah.
Right before Warmth of the Sun.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a crazy deal, but. The thing, it's filler, number 1. And there's some filler on Shutdown Volume 2. We didn't talk about the fact that the album only went to number 13.
Oh,
And it
okay.
was considered not as successful as the few that
Sure.
preceded it. And part of the reason people think of it is because there's some there's great tunes on it and then some weak stuff on it. This is considered kind of weak and filler. But we have to remember Brian's work schedule and like how he probably had to put some things like this together, although... This is funny because it wasn't a lot less work. All the little snippets of the other songs, they literally re-recorded in the studio. They didn't. People have thought they used snippets from the earlier records or maybe outtakes. No, that Brian had they sang them all live
Yeah.
in the studio to do that little thing, and so it was not. So maybe it wasn't about less work, and who knows. But the one thing I will say about it, and I loved this about the Beach Boys' humility, even early on, they were willing to make fun of themselves.
Yeah, that's good.
And Mike was willing to make fun of his nasal baritone sound, even knowing, he was confident enough to go, hey, I know it's, but I know that there's this aspect to it that people might not like. And the same thing with Brian's falsetto. And they were willing to make fun of it.
Yeah.
To the point, and they again just sound like young kids
Yeah.
on the thing. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. And then The Warmth of the Sun, which is just a magical song. I think it's worth mentioning that the actual first name of this podcast was, when we first started talking, I said, well, what do you want to name it? And you go, I don't know, The Warmth of the Sun.
Yeah.
And we actually kind of went with that, even to the point that if you look at the logo of the podcast, initially, that's where the logo was inspired from, was The Warmth of the Sun. When I made that logo, I made it based off of the title, The Warmth of the Sun.
Right. And recording the silhouette of the violin. In there. Yeah.
So it was the exact same thing. And then as we started to work through, and before I think we even recorded the first episode, we were just in in your Beach Boys room, and we're like, you know what, that makes a little more sense for the setting. So I thought it would be worth mentioning that, this song is, the feel of this song and everything is something that you had said from the beginning, like, I don't know, Warmth of the Sun, I'd like, let's call it that. But anyway, let's talk about the song itself.
Well, this is famously, it was started the day before President Kennedy got shot. And so some people have actually said it was written in tribute to that, and it's never been that. But the next morning when Brian and Mike woke up, because this is a Brian and legit Mike tune. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of Mike's highest moments. They got up and got the news just like everybody else did, that President Kennedy had been shot that next day. And so that, I think they finished it up that night in the spirit of that melancholy sadness and loss. And that's the effect of the Kennedy assassination on Warmth of the Sun, right? So Warmth of the Sun ended up being a B-side to Dance, Dance, Dance way late in the year. So let's don't even talk about that. I think it's on side 1 of Endless Summer. So I was introduced, I couldn't understand the brilliance of the tune when I was little, but I knew it had a eerie quality to it. And I knew that, I remember it being really, really, really hard chord wise. And I will go through it a little bit, but, Probe and Gregory of the Wonderments, there's a quote from him someplace where he talked about the Brian Wilson's band was trying to do this one time, and they just it's so hard. And that was after they've done Pet Sounds and the Smile stuff and everything. There's something about the complexity about Warmth of the Sun that they just couldn't quite nail.
Really?
Yeah, it's a really it's really cool. I'm gonna just demo a little bit of it. We were going to make that lesson of it one time, I think.
Yeah,
you know?
you had a lesson of
and
it.
So the amazing thing about it, and it's been documented before, but it's a 6/8 again. Brian in these 6/8 ballads, but it goes 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he's starting it out like a regular doo-wop, which sounds. That's a regular doo-wop progression, and this is in C to start out, but he starts out. Then he literally, I believe he's thinking to change key to E flat here and does the same movement. Then goes back to the 2 of the C. And then 5, and then a 5 augmented. And so it really there, you got a C to A minor, which is 1 to 6, and then you go to the key of E flat. It's like a whole key change, and think of this if it was a 1 to 6. And then only a whole step away from a D minor, which is back to the 2. I already said that. Now going into the chorus, he hits a big E7 because we're now in the key of A, and it's A major 7. Then A minor 7. That's actually now the 2 of G, because this is 5, and then we're G, but G major 7. And then the G augmented again. So this augmented chord, I'm going to talk a little bit about it in the next episode too, but he starts to, that's kind of unheard of in pop music. Some like diminished and augmented chords and things that Brian starts to use. It's just an example of the complexity. I'm not going to go into it much more than that because I could go forever. It also modulates from C to D flat in the end, and you have to do all of that crazy stuff in the new keys.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, remember we went. I think we made a backing track for it, and we were going to do a live thing where we're going to remember how hard it was for me to just, like especially getting that last violin part in D flat, getting all the stuff. And yeah, it's pretty hard. But anyway, beautifully sung, by the way. Brian's voice, beautiful, and the Beach Boys blend on this again. It rivals Don't Worry Baby. So we got an album that has both Don't Worry Baby and The Warmth of the Sun.
Yeah.
Besides Fun.
Yeah, well, and I remember just I'd never heard the song before. You'd brought it up when we were thinking about a name, and then I listened to it, and I was just like, yeah, well, I was just instantly just like, oh wow, this is amazing music here that I didn't even know that they had played. So
another fun aside is that it was one of Murray's favorites of Brian's. He thought it was a brilliant composition.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then the Car of Mine.
This Car of Mine.
Oh, I'm sorry, This Car of Mine.
Yes.
This is a good one. I don't know. What do you have to say?
This is a Brian and Mike tune.
Okay.
I think it ends side 1 on the album proper. It doesn't get much love from Beach Boy historians and liner note writers. I remember hearing it on the Spirit of America compilation, which is the one right after Endless Summer, was also huge. So I heard it pretty young, and I remember liking the chord progression. There's some moments where Brian's got a 4 over a 5 chord, and this is kind of pre-shading some stuff that will come up, but I like the chord progression. It's a simple one, and I like the melody, and I especially like Dennis's lead on it.
Yeah.
I think it's tough.
Yeah.
And, it's just a different type of a song. And it even kind of references the doo-wop stuff at the end. A diddly-ho.
Yeah.
Diddly-ho.
Totally. Yeah. Which it's funny is like I didn't like when I was listening to it. Obviously, I never heard this one before either. But when I was listening to it, and it just wasn't really, that one was really hitting for me. But didn't hit that part at the end. I was like, oh, well, I like that. I like that. So, Why Do Fools Fall in Love?
That's the beginning of side 2. This is a full Wrecking Crew moment.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to lie and say it was the first full Wrecking Crew moment for Brian, because there was lots of other moments with Honeys and Jan and Dean and other people where wrecking crews were used, and I just don't want to get into saying that, but it's one of the first examples on the records where we've got, I don't think there are any Beach Boys on this recording. It's all the wrecking crew, and it's done at a different studio. I think most people think it's done at Gold Star. For years, some people thought it was done in New York for a while, but I don't think that's the case anymore. This was the B-side of Fun, Fun, Fun.
Okay.
That was released in, we said March. No, it was released in February.
Okay. I thought it was a great cover to do. I mean, what a good choice. You know?
And it's another example of how the Beach Boys make covers their own. Most people know this as opposed to the real Frankie Lyman version from 1956. It was done by Frankie. I should have said that. Frankie Lyman and another guy wrote it. But he had a group. It was Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, and they had a hit with it, I think, in 56.
Okay.
But it's Brian he reinvents the song almost, putting a crazy middle instrumental part, and then when the instruments all break down and there's that insane a cappella part that's just like, it's mind melting what he does with the chords and everything there, and it's I remember this was another one from Spirit of America for me, and so I heard it very young, and I remember just aspects of these things were thrilling. I kept coming back to that word, thrilling. They made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah.
That's, I don't know what else.
No,
I mean, to say about
that acapella part was that was the thing that stuck out to me. So you just, that was, I love the choice of the cover, and then just that acapella part, that's that wow factor sort of moment.
I do want to say, because it is the one tune that the big crew's on, it's got Leon Russell on piano, the famous Leon Russell. It's got Tommy Tedesco on it. Those are, and besides Hal and Ray Pullman and some of those other guys, but it was a full-on wrecking crew deal. Okay. It was Brian trying to be Phil Spector.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then Pom Pom Play Girl.
Okay.
This was not my jam. Not my jam. It's kind
of. I can understand that, and it's probably everybody thought that Carl's first lead for years was on Summer Days and Summer Nights on a song called Girl Don't Tell Me. And on the back of that album in the liner notes, Brian says, I finally wrote a song Carl dug singing, because everybody's people didn't know it was Carl for years on this, but he kind of sings it with the attitude like it's not his favorite thing to sing, or kind of nonchalant.
Yeah.
I will say that it's another, it's kind of like the be true to your school thing.
Totally.
I do that. I do kind of like Mike's bass voice. Doesn't really know why she's waving her hands. She's thinking about the boys sitting up. At some of that juxtaposition there. But again, there is crazy stuff going on in the music for sure. The intro to this is in the key of G, just the intro. So just shortly. Rock, rock, pom, pom, play girl. And then we're going to go to the 5 of what will now be A flat. Dun 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 1 4 1 then the 5. Dun 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 the 4 dun 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 5 dun. Then back to the key of G, but a 4 chord. Rah rah pom pom play girl. And then so another example of it's just a kind of a bullshit little song, right? But there's still musical interest. It's like when I first heard this was another one I didn't hear till the Twofers came out. With me, because I wasn't paying attention to any lyrics, it's just like every song, like In the Parking Lot and this one, even though I don't like them so much now, when I first heard them, the chord changes were so, oh, wow, God, what's going on here? So I would actually like them more. I think that it's a fun little tune and it kind of echoes a little bit of the type of stuff that Brian was doing with Jan and Dean musically at the same time. Anyway, let's go on to the next thing.
Okay. Keep an Eye on Summer.
Yes.
Just love this one. Wow, that was a great one. It's just like another like
another 6/8 ballad,
doo-wop ballad,
with great chord changes and modulations.
Yeah.
Have I failed to say modulations on any song on this album?
Yeah,
and that's a rare thing.
Yeah,
or I guess not really in some ways, but yeah, it is, especially the way he's doing it here. But I also got to say that he's really getting to he's loving this 6/8 thing, and he is doing it so much and reinventing the basic doo-wop progression so many times. It's almost like when I think David Leaf said at some point, on some of these tunes, it's kind of like he's recycling himself. And I get that part of it, but it's in brilliant ways.
Yeah.
But it's almost like everything's a play on Surfer Girl.
Yeah, yeah.
And but this he must have really liked, because the second solo album, Imagination, this was one of the Beach Boy covers on it.
Okay.
And then it also has very prominent viola and violin parts that were played by my buddy Larry Franklin from
nice.
Asleep at the Wheel.
Nice.
Oh, got my shirt on.
There you go. So then we go to Shutdown Part 2.
Okay.
And this is just a jam.
This is just an instrumental.
Just a head bobber.
I think that Carl gets the credit on it. They probably, because they called the album Shutdown Volume 2, probably thought, okay, we need something real quick that we can call Shutdown. And Mike's blowing the sax on.
Oh, really?
I forgot to say on the Surfing USA album, he's doing like just bare bones few notes here and there on the sax on that too.
Okay.
And I should have said that. On the early records, every once in a while, Mike was not much of a sax player though.
Yeah.
So, but that's him on the beginning of this. Carl, I think, gets the credit for it. It's nice, but it in the end, it's filler for this album.
Oh, it is.
And it also,
I enjoyed it.
It's still,
it was good.
It's clean and really produced. So as opposed to the earlier instrumentals for me, where there's more guts and primal, just early musicianship, because this is a little too polished for me. So sure. I like the earlier instrumentals better than this, and
like a little more of that raw feel.
Yeah. This is just like a little too slick, and I don't know. I should, that's
hey, it's your preference. I mean, I get.
There's some cool guitar effects. I think they're putting a guitar through a Leslie organ speaker on this, and so they're doing some adventurous things. And there's also a little bit of a little twist on the 12-bar progression. I mean, Brian's got to screw with everything, right?
Yeah. Okay. And then Louie.
Yeah.
Okay. Cover.
Well, and this is a cover that I, when I first heard it out of them, and I heard it not. It was fairly early on, but I had already heard the famous cover of Louie Louie by the Kingsmen that is the famous one that we all know. So it was weird to me. It wasn't until I found out later what the Beach Boys were doing with this cover. It was written by a guy named Richard Berry, and I can't remember the name of his group, but they did a version in 1956 that was way different than how the Kingsmen covered it. Okay. And it was more about this Jamaican story where you can actually hear the words. But if you listen to that original version, you'll get because a lot of people say, this sounds pretty lame compared to what the real Louie Louie. Well, that wasn't the real Louie Louie. The real Louie Louie was something the Beach Boys were kind of patterning their thing on. Okay. And also it's Carl singing on this again. The guy who didn't, and Mike are the leads. Although I think this is one of the cases, I'm listening in a couple of spots, I think it's one of those things where Brian and Carl might be singing on the same, either Brian tracked it and then Carl double tracked right over the top. Right. Oh yeah, just also in Louie Louie, we do have a modulation for one verse. Because Brian just, I guess,
that's what he's doing.
Wow.
Yeah, modulating everything on this album.
So finally, you have Denny's drums.
Okay.
And so let's look at Denny's drums, Louie Louie Shutdown Part 2, and the Cassius Love versus Sonny Wilson thing. You really do have to, filler tracks.
Yeah, that's, I mean, like you said, at the end of the day, that's kind of
they needed stuff, and hey, what might be kind of pop? Denny's really popular. Let's give him for years, people thought this was Hal Blaine, and I got to tell you, That's an insult to Hal Blaine.
Yeah.
No, it's good enough for Dennis, but I mean, for any knowledgeable person to think that's Hal Blaine doing what he's doing on there, I mean, it'd just be crazy.
Yeah,
But so anyway, that is Dennis. And
Yeah.
that's the end of the Shutdown Volume 2 record.
Yeah,
And
great. I mean, even with those fillers at the end, I mean, it's just, I mean, like you said, you get "Don't Worry, Baby," "The Warmth of the Sun," and "Fun," all on this
Stone
album.
classics.
Like, I mean,
They would make the album anyway.
yeah,
You could have 8 or 10 bad songs and have a couple like that.
Yeah.
But I think I've always really, because I didn't have it when I was a kid, I really wanted it. And so maybe that is part of the deal. Maybe that's also part of my obsession with this color, although I think they look as cool as hell.
yeah, no, that's definitely. So then we're on to All Summer Long in the next album.
Next album will be
And,
on All Summer Long. The last, let's call it proper studio album, sans the Christmas album of 1964.
Perfect. Okay, well, in that case, thank you as always for listening. Check back with us, and we'll be going over All Summer Long. All right, thank you.